My beloved child, there is a quiet truth hiding beneath all the impressive things you can see, and once you recognize it, the entire story begins to look different. The third party believed love could be influenced by appearances, more attention, bigger gestures, expensive moments, constant presence, everything designed to look unforgettable. From the outside, it almost seemed convincing. Anyone watching might have assumed that eventually your soulmate would be impressed enough to choose what looked bigger. But something unexpected was happening inside his heart. The more complicated everything became around him, the more clearly he began to understand what he actually wanted. And strangely, it was not something money could purchase. Stay with this, because the smallest detail may become the biggest revelation. He noticed something that surprised even him. Grand gestures could create excitement, but excitement eventually became quiet. Attention could make someone feel important for an evening, but attention alone could not create understanding. Beautiful things could decorate a moment, but they could not automatically make that moment meaningful. And somewhere between all those attempts to impress him, his heart began searching for the opposite, simplicity. A conversation without performance. A presence that did not demand anything. Someone beside whom silence did not feel uncomfortable. Someone who could understand the person underneath everything he showed the world. That realization changed the emotional direction of this entire story. But don't skip what comes next, because this is where the third party misunderstood him completely. She thought she needed to become more impressive, more noticeable, more unforgettable. So every time she sensed distance, she tried adding something bigger. More attention. Another gesture. Another carefully created moment. Yet what if the very things she believed were bringing him closer were quietly helping him recognize what was missing? Think about that. Sometimes abundance reveals simplicity. Sometimes noise teaches a person exactly why they miss peace. And sometimes being surrounded by everything impressive makes one ordinary, sincere connection suddenly feel priceless. Your soulmate was beginning to ask himself questions he had avoided for longer than anyone realized. Who makes me feel understood when there is nothing to celebrate? Who would still recognize me if every impressive thing disappeared? Who brings peace instead of pressure? And then came the question that changed everything. Why does my mind keep returning to the person who never needed to compete for my attention? That question carried your presence into a place no material gesture could reach. Not because you were trying to win. Not because you were proving yourself. But because something about your energy represented what his heart had quietly been missing: authenticity. Stay a little longer, because there is another layer here. The third party believed she was competing with another person. She wasn't. She was competing with a feeling. A feeling of emotional ease. A feeling of being accepted without constantly performing. A feeling that perhaps the future could be simpler than the present. And you cannot easily manufacture that feeling with bigger gestures, because genuine connection is not measured by how loudly someone enters your life. Sometimes it is measured by how peaceful your heart becomes when you imagine them staying. Then something subtle happened. He stopped asking, "Who can give me more?" and started asking, "Where can I finally be myself?" That is the turning point. His simple heart was not searching for perfection. It wanted honesty, consistency, warmth. Someone who could laugh at ordinary moments, understand quiet moods, appreciate small victories, and build something meaningful without needing every day to look extraordinary. He began imagining a future that was surprisingly uncomplicated: peaceful mornings, genuine conversations, shared plans, small adventures, mutual respect, and the freedom to be human around someone. And somehow, when his mind created that picture, you appeared inside it. Wait till the final moment of this chapter, because even he was not prepared for what he realized next. The third party could offer impressive experiences, but she could not decide what those experiences meant to him. She could surround him with attention, but she could not control where his thoughts wandered afterward. She could make certain moments look extraordinary, but she could not manufacture the quiet familiarity his heart associated with you. That difference became impossible for him to ignore. And this is where the future begins changing shape. Because once someone understands the difference between being impressed and being emotionally understood, it becomes difficult to forget. Your soulmate began seeing that perhaps the life he truly wanted was never supposed to be the loudest one. Perhaps it was supposed to be the one where he could breathe. Where affection felt natural. Where two people did not constantly have to prove their value. Where the smallest moments could carry the deepest meaning. Something huge is waiting inside that realization. Because the third party still believed she needed one final impressive move to change his mind. But she did not yet know that his heart had already begun asking for something she had never thought to offer. And what he wanted was so simple that almost everyone had overlooked it. Except you. There was one detail nobody around him noticed at first, and strangely, it was the detail that began changing everything. Your soulmate was no longer reacting to the biggest gestures the way he once had. Something inside him had shifted. The things designed to impress him still looked beautiful from the outside, but they no longer reached the place inside him that mattered most. He could appreciate them, smile at them, even remember them, yet afterward a strange question remained. Why do I still feel as though something important is missing? That question became impossible to silence, because the answer was slowly leading him towards something much simpler than anyone expected. The third party had built an entire strategy around what could be seen. More attention. More impressive plans. More opportunities to remind him, look at everything I can bring into your life. And there was nothing inherently wrong with generosity or ambition. But she misunderstood one essential thing about his heart. He was not looking for someone who could make his life appear extraordinary to other people. He was beginning to want someone who could make an ordinary life feel extraordinary to him. Don't skip this part, because that difference sounds small until you understand what it means. Imagine two completely different futures appearing in front of him. In one, everything looks impressive. Beautiful places. Big moments. Constant excitement. Endless reasons for other people to admire what he has. But underneath everything, he still feels that he must perform. He must respond correctly. He must remain interesting. He must continually prove that he deserves the life surrounding him. Then there is another future. Nothing is trying desperately to impress anyone. There is laughter in a kitchen over something completely ridiculous. There are conversations that begin with ordinary words and somehow continue for hours. There are quiet drives where nobody needs to fill every second with noise. There are difficult days when someone simply says, "You don't have to explain everything. I'm here." There are dreams built slowly instead of displayed quickly. There is ambition, yes, but there is also peace. There is growth without competition. There is affection without performance. Which future do you think his heart began choosing when nobody was watching? That was the realization the third party never planned for. She thought the competition was about who could offer more. His heart had quietly changed the question to who could make more feel unnecessary. And your presence kept appearing somewhere inside that answer. Not because you possessed some mysterious perfection. You didn't need to. What stayed with him was something far more human. The way you seemed capable of noticing what existed underneath appearances. The possibility that around you, he would not constantly need to become a more impressive version of himself just to remain valuable. He remembered small things differently now, words, expressions, moments, even silences that seemed insignificant when they happened. Sometimes the heart understands the importance of a moment only after the moment has passed. Stay till the end, because what happened next surprised him more than anyone. He began comparing feelings instead of circumstances. When he thought about certain impressive experiences, he remembered what happened. When he thought about you, he remembered how he felt. There is an enormous difference. One creates memories. The other creates meaning. And meaning was beginning to matter more. He started noticing how often the world encourages people to chase what looks valuable instead of recognizing what feels genuine. Bigger homes. Bigger celebrations. Bigger promises. Bigger displays of affection. Yet somewhere beneath all that noise, his heart wanted something almost embarrassingly simple, someone he could trust with the unpolished version of himself. The version that sometimes gets tired. The version that does not always know what to say. The version with unfinished dreams. The version that occasionally needs silence rather than advice. The version that wants to be loved without having to earn that love every morning. And this is where the story quietly turned toward you. Because he began remembering something about your presence that he had underestimated before. You never seemed to need the performance. Pause there. That realization affected him deeply. The third party had been trying to show him everything she could add to his world. But your connection represented something entirely different, the possibility that he might already be enough before anything was added. What if that is what his heart had been searching for all along? Suddenly, the biggest gestures could not compete with the smallest emotional truth. He wanted to come home emotionally. Not simply to a place. To a person. Someone whose presence made the complicated parts of life feel manageable. Someone who could celebrate success without turning life into competition. Someone who could sit beside him during ordinary days and still make those days worth remembering. Someone who cared about who he was becoming, not merely what he could become. And slowly, almost reluctantly, he realized why thoughts of you kept returning. You represented that simplicity. But something else was happening behind the scenes. The third party noticed the change. Not through some dramatic confrontation. Nothing needed to explode. The signs were much quieter than that, which somehow made them more meaningful. His enthusiasm was different. Certain impressive gestures no longer produced the reaction she expected. Conversations that once captured his full attention began losing their hold. He became more thoughtful. More inward. More interested in questions about meaning, compatibility, peace, and the future. She could sense that his attention was physically present while part of his mind seemed somewhere else. And she began wondering where. That was when she made a natural but crucial mistake. She decided she needed to try harder. More attention. A bigger surprise. Something unforgettable. Something that would finally prove what she could offer. But she did not realize that every additional attempt was accidentally reinforcing the lesson already forming inside him. He did not need bigger. He needed deeper. And depth cannot always be purchased, staged, scheduled, or displayed. Depth appears when two people can be honest without becoming afraid of being misunderstood. It grows when someone remembers the small details you thought nobody noticed. It develops through consistency when nobody is applauding. It exists when silence feels safe rather than awkward. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that. And then came a moment so ordinary that nobody else would have considered it important. He was alone. No third party. No audience. No impressive setting. No distraction. Just him and his thoughts. And unexpectedly, he imagined telling you something. Not something dramatic. Something small. Something that had happened during his day. He imagined your reaction. Your expression. The way the conversation might unfold. And then he caught himself. Why you? Why was his instinct suddenly to share ordinary life with you? That question stayed. Because people often imagine sharing extraordinary moments with many people. Celebrations naturally gather crowds. Success attracts attention. Big news creates conversations. But when someone becomes the person you instinctively want to tell the smallest things to, something deeper may be developing. He understood that immediately. Maybe that was what he had been missing. He didn't only want someone beside him when life became exciting. He wanted someone he would still choose when absolutely nothing exciting was happening. Someone who could make a Tuesday evening matter. Someone who could hear an ordinary story and somehow make him feel heard. Someone whose presence was not another event he needed to prepare for. And again, his thoughts returned to you. Before you go, hear this line: sometimes the person who changes your future is not the person offering you the biggest world. Sometimes it is the person beside whom you finally stop needing the world to be big. That realization was beginning to reshape him. And if these words remind you of someone who needs a little hope about choosing genuine connection over appearances, you can share this message with them. If this story is speaking to something you have experienced, you can leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to continue walking through stories like this, you are always welcome to subscribe and stay close. Because we have not reached the most surprising part yet. Your soulmate began imagining what would happen if all the impressive things disappeared. No money influencing choices. No attention from outsiders. No carefully arranged moments. No comparison. No pressure. Just two people standing honestly in front of each other. Who would he choose then? The answer arrived faster than he expected. And it unsettled his assumptions, not because the answer was frightening, but because it was remarkably clear. His heart did not want someone who could constantly entertain him. It wanted someone who could understand him. It did not want endless proof. It wanted consistency. It did not want perfection. It wanted sincerity. It did not want someone who made every room notice them. It wanted someone whose presence made him forget there was a room at all. And suddenly, many things from the past began making sense. Certain conversations with you that he had dismissed as ordinary now felt different in memory. Certain moments when you did not chase his attention became meaningful. Times when you simply allowed him to be himself began standing out against everything happening around him now. The irony was impossible to miss. The third party had been trying harder and harder to become unforgettable. Yet your lack of performance was exactly what he could not forget. What if this moment changes the entire direction of his path? Because once he saw that contrast, he could not easily unsee it. He began noticing the difference between someone wanting his attention and someone understanding his nature. The difference between being admired and being known. The difference between being entertained and being peaceful. The difference between a relationship that looks successful and one that actually feels safe enough to grow inside. And then his thoughts moved toward the future. This was where everything became more serious. He stopped imagining only the next exciting month and started imagining years. 5 years. 10 years. Ordinary mornings. Unexpected challenges. Changing dreams. Growing responsibilities. Quiet weekends. New chapters neither person could predict yet. Who could walk beside him through all of that? Big gestures could create unforgettable beginnings. But could they create peaceful years? Attention could make him feel wanted. But could it make him feel understood? Money could solve certain problems. But could it create emotional closeness? He knew the answer. And for the first time, he understood that what his simple heart wanted was not small at all. Peace is not small. Trust is not small. Consistency is not small. Being able to show someone your imperfect side without fearing that their affection will disappear is not small. Building a future where two people can grow without competing against each other is not small. Those things might look simple from the outside. But inside a human life, they are enormous. Something important is waiting for you here, because the third party was about to make the biggest gesture yet. She believed it would settle everything. She believed that after this, he would finally understand why choosing her made sense. She had considered what would impress him, what would capture his attention, what would make him imagine everything she could provide. There was only one problem. His definition of everything had changed. And she didn't know. He was no longer measuring a future by what someone could place in front of him. He was measuring it by what he felt when all distractions were removed. And in that silence, there was one simple desire becoming clearer. He wanted to be seen. Fully. Quietly. Honestly. He wanted someone who would know the difference between his confident smile and the smile he used when something was on his mind. Someone who could celebrate his ambition while reminding him he did not need achievement to deserve affection. Someone who would build beside him rather than constantly impress him. And when he pictured that person, the emotional outline looked increasingly familiar. It looked like you. But the next realization went even deeper. He began wondering whether he had misunderstood you before. Perhaps he had interpreted your calmness as distance. Perhaps he had mistaken your refusal to compete for indifference. Perhaps when you gave him space, he assumed you cared less, when in reality you simply respected his freedom. Perhaps he had been surrounded by so much visible attention that he temporarily forgot how powerful quiet sincerity could be. That thought stopped him. Because now he was seeing your past behavior through a different lens. And sometimes, a new perspective can rewrite an old memory without changing a single detail of what happened. The memories were the same. His understanding was different. That was enough. He remembered moments when you could have demanded attention but didn't. Moments when you could have tried proving yourself but chose authenticity. Moments when you allowed things to unfold naturally. At the time, those moments seemed too simple to compete with everything louder around him. Now simplicity was precisely what he valued. There was almost something futuristic about the way his imagination began moving forward, like his mind was quietly testing different timelines. In one timeline, he continued choosing appearances. Life remained impressive, busy, constantly stimulated. Yet somewhere beneath everything, he continued searching for emotional rest. In another timeline, he chose honesty. Perhaps fewer people understood it. Perhaps the beginning looked less spectacular. But the years ahead felt warmer. There were inside jokes nobody else understood. Shared goals written on ordinary pieces of paper. Small traditions created accidentally. Long conversations after difficult days. Quiet encouragement before important moments. Growth. Freedom. Friendship inside love. And when he imagined growing older, which future felt meaningful? That answer mattered more than any temporary excitement. Wait till the final moment, because this is where the third party unknowingly revealed exactly why her approach could never completely reach him. She was preparing to show him what she could give. His heart was preparing to discover who could simply stay. Those are two completely different questions. One is about possession. The other is about presence. And presence was winning quietly. He did not need someone promising a perfect future. He wanted someone willing to build an imperfect but meaningful one. He did not need every day to feel cinematic. He wanted ordinary days worth returning to. He did not need someone who could always say the perfect thing. He wanted someone whose honest words he could trust. The simplicity of it almost made him laugh. After all the complexity, all the comparison, all the impressive attempts, the answer his heart was moving toward could fit inside one sentence. I want to feel like myself beside the person I love. And suddenly, he understood why you remained in his thoughts. Because somewhere in his memory, he had already felt a glimpse of that. A glimpse. Not a guarantee. Not a fantasy. Just enough of a feeling to make him wonder what could happen if the connection were given space to grow honestly. That curiosity became stronger. And curiosity can change direction. He started wondering what you were thinking now. Whether you had moved emotionally forward. Whether you still remembered the same moments he was beginning to revisit. Whether the simplicity he now treasured was still available, or whether he had recognized its value too late. That possibility created urgency inside him, but not panic. Clarity. For perhaps the first time, he was not asking what everyone else expected him to choose. He was asking what kind of life he actually wanted to wake up inside. And the answer had almost nothing to do with money, status, attention, or grand displays. It was about belonging. Not belonging to someone. Belonging beside someone. There is a difference. A healthy connection does not make your world smaller. It gives you enough security to explore a larger one. It does not demand that you disappear into another person. It allows two complete people to build something neither could create alone. That was the kind of connection he began wanting. Simple, but never shallow. Calm, but never empty. Steady, but still alive. And there was one final question waiting for him. A question he had not yet dared to answer completely. If his heart truly wanted simplicity, sincerity, peace, friendship, and a person who could see him without the performance, why had your face appeared every time he imagined it? He sat with that question longer than expected. And somewhere else, the third party was preparing something she believed would finally win him over. She had no idea that the real decision was no longer happening around him. It was happening within him. No audience could see it. No expensive gesture could interrupt it. No competition could decide it. Because the next chapter would not be determined by who offered him the biggest thing. It would be determined by what his heart considered priceless. And just when he thought he understood what that was, one memory of you returned with such unexpected clarity that it changed the meaning of everything he had been feeling. It was not a grand memory. That was exactly why it mattered. And what he remembered about you in that tiny moment would lead him toward a realization even the third party could never have predicted.